Okay, this video is going to like a sampler video really. We're going to go through the different, not different stitches, but the way we use the stitches to make different textures in knitting. So we've got a cast on row of 15 stitches here, and the first sampler we're going to do is stocking stitch. That's ST when you see it in patterns. So the stocking stitch is very simple. We knit one whole row. So I'm going to do this as quickly as possible. So yeah, so stocking stitch is when you knit one whole row and the following row you purl. Right. Try and quickly knit this up. This is a standard stitch in most knitting patterns. You will come across a stocking stitch. This gives you a plain look to your knitting. So okay, that's our first knit row done. Now we're just going to purl the next row. Weave that end in after. This is quite a quick stitch. Helps you move your knitting along. Right. It's just starting now. What we're going to do is we're going to quickly do 2 more rows, and then so now we've done 2 more rows. So this is 4 rows, knit, purl, and you can see this is stocking stitch. This is how it looks. This is normally what they would call the right side, the RS in a knitting pattern. So this is the right side, and they call this the wrong side. Well, this would be a WS in a pattern. So that's stocking stitch. Sometimes in patterns, this sometimes isn't the front. They'll make what they call the reverse stocking stitch, and this is what they mean by reversed. You knit it and purl it exactly the same way, except for when you sew it up, they'll want this to be on the front of the garment rather than the traditional plain. Okay. So that's stocking stitch. That's a sample of stocking stitch. Now I'm going to show you a sample of 2-2 rib. This is normally always used in garments around cuffs or sleeves, and because it's more elasticated, and they'll normally always ask you to do it on a smaller needle to give the tightness. So we've got 22 stitches on here, so we're going to do 2-2 rib, and we start with knit. We're on the right side facing, yarns at the back, so we're going to knit 2, 1, 2, and now we're going to purl 2. Before we purl, we need to remember to bring the yarn to the front of our knitting, and now we're going to purl 2 stitches. And now we want to rib, so we want to put the yarn to the back of the knitting for our knit stitch. So 1, 2, I'm going to purl, bring yarn forward, 1, 2, to the back for 2 knit stitches, 1, 2. So that's our first row of the 2-2 rib. Now what that creates, when we turn it over, this is important so you know, where we can see these 2 lines going across this, we know that's going to be a purl stitch next. And when there's no bubble across the top here, we know that's a knit stitch. Now another way to know is that the needle always goes in the needle always goes in better if you know. So if I was to knit that stitch, it would be quite awkward because this yarn is in the way. So we've ended on a knit, so naturally when we turn it over we'll want to purl. So now we're going to purl these 2 stitches, 1, 2. We're going to put our yarn to the back because now these are 2 knit stitches. Knit, knit, to the front, purl 2, to the back. When you see those lines going across, you know that you're on a purl row. But with rib, it's a bit of both. There we go. See that? 2, 2, 2 sitting on top. If you turn it over, unlike the stocking stitch where it's definitely a back and a front, with rib, it looks the same. So that's your 2-2 rib. Okay, now we've done stocking stitch, we've done rib stitch, now we're going to do moss stitch. This is very similar to rib, going backwards and forwards with your yarn, but with moss stitch you need to have an odd number of stitches on your needle. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to do 1 by 1 moss stitch. So we're going to knit 1, purl 1 all the way along, knit 1, purl 1, and because you've got an odd amount of stitches on your needle, that means if you start with a knit, you're going to end with a knit. So, and that's important because it won't work otherwise. So again, I'm just going to knit 1, purl 1 all the way along this row. Okay. The moss stitch, it's used in jackets and things like that because it's quite a heavy stitch because you are interlocking the yarns quite tightly with moss stitch. So, but it does look very nice once it's been done. Right, so I started with a knit and I'm ending with a knit. Right, so I'm going to turn it around, and with the rib I pointed out that that would be a purl stitch and this would be a knit stitch. But with moss stitch all we do is we are actually going to knit back into that stitch, and we're going to do exactly the same as what we just did on the first row. So we're going to knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1 all the way to the end. Yeah, so we're doing the opposite to what we would normally do in these stitches. So okay, I'll try and be as fast as I can so you can see the effect. Again, I'm going to knit 1, purl 1 all the way to the end. So I'm doing exactly the same as I did on row 1. Okay. You can just see it, but it doesn't look very nice at this stage, I never think. So I'm going to do 2 more rows and then you can see it better. So again, I'm starting with the knit, I'm starting with the knit 1, purl 1 on every row. See this bobbled stitch where these little loops go across. This is known as moss stitch. And over mass, it really is a pretty stitch. It's a hard wearing stitch. It's quite a thick stitch. Then we're going to teach you the purl stitch. We've done a few rows of knitting already, and this is the back of your knitting. This would be the front of your knitting, and this is the back of your knitting. And most purl stitches are at the back.